The I-Team tonight's looking into a massive recall of millions of sleep apnea machines, and it has patients upset, and they're waiting, a lot of them. Investigative reporter Brian New with what's gone wrong that has left so many with no good options.
This is the Dream Machine.
Doctors told her it was a life-saving device. So for years before she went to sleep, Janet Gray of White Settlement strapped on her mask as her CPAP machine forced air into her lungs. Left untreated, Janet's sleep apnea could cause her to stop breathing.
You die in your sleep. You just stop breathing.
But in June of 2021, Janet's Dream Station CPAP machine was one of more than 5 million breathing devices recalled by Philips Respironics. The company warned a foam meant to reduce noise was breaking off and blowing into the mouths of users. Inhaling these foam particles, the company wrote in 2021, could result in serious injury, which can be life-threatening. Philips, which produces more than 40% of the world's sleep apnea devices, initially estimated it could replace all effective devices within a year. But that deadline came and went, with many patients still waiting.
It's horrible. You know, you're afraid to go to sleep because if you go to sleep without it, you might die, but if you go to sleep with it, it might kill you down the road.
Since April of 2021, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has received 98,000 complaints associated with the foam breakdown in Philips's breathing devices. Complaints about infections, chest pain, and cancer, including 346 reports of death. The FDA says these reports are helpful in identifying problems, but because they're self-reported, they lack verification. Philips says it found no conclusive data linking these devices and the deaths reported. In fact, after recalling millions of devices, the company says it did additional testing and found no association between its devices and cancer. The FDA called Philips's new analysis unpersuasive.
Yeah, how have things been going with your CPAP?
Dr. Vikas Jan of Frisco says the lack of communication from Philips and the FDA about the recall has put physicians in a tough spot. With no clear timetable on when patients will receive a replacement device, Dr. Jan says it's been extremely difficult to provide his patients with sound advice.
For the company to come to us and say, well, we don't know when we're going to be able to send a replacement, but you should talk to the patient and decide whether or not they should continue to use the device. I think, wow, so that's going to be the burden that you're going to place on physicians without having a clear process in place.
As doctors struggle with what to tell patients, shortly after the recall, the FDA conducted an inspection of the Philips manufacturing facility in Pennsylvania. In the report, inspectors noted Philips knew there was a problem with the foam in 2015, 6 years before the recall, and yet no additional design change or corrective action was taken. A Philips spokesperson told the I-Team prior to 2021 there were limited complaints related to foam degradation, which were evaluated and addressed on a case-by-case basis.
This is what they sent me.
Last fall, nearly 18 months after the recall, Janet received a refurbished replacement device. The foam inside had been pulled out and replaced with silicone. But after all she's been through,
I don't trust it.
Janet says she will not be using it.
I trust it less than the first one.
But you need this machine.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
You're between a rock and a hard place. And nobody cares.
Now, late last year, Philips began recalling nearly 20,000 of these refurbished devices, citing two different issues. One, they were still finding some leftover foam particles in some of the reworked devices. And two, the silicone that replaced the foam in some cases was coming unglued and could potentially block the airflow. Doug, last month, the FDA marked this latest one as a Class 1 recall, meaning it's the most serious type.
Yeah, and you know, first thing that comes to mind, you listen to Ms. Phillips, trust becomes such an issue, and you can understand that. This comes, though, as some people still haven't received a replacement like she did last fall from the original recall. When you talked with people from Philips, did they give you any explanation as to why it has taken so long for people to get the devices replaced? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so in an average year, Philips says it produces about 1 million of these sleep devices. There were more than 5 million devices recalled, and it happened at a time when there were still global supply chain issues. Philips says it's now completed production on 90% of the devices needed for that original recall. But Doug, you still have to get them out to people, and Dr. Jan told me just a couple weeks ago he had a new patient come into the office with one of these devices on the recalled list. And Doug, that patient had no idea.
And that is exactly why the I-Team digs in and gets answers. Brian New, thank you so much, my friend.